Tonight, we are blessed to welcome Spyridoula Fotini of the Assembly of Bishops. The full title is the Assembly of Canonical Orthodox Bishops of the United States of America, but we can also just call it the AOB or the Assembly and be fine with that. She's going to tell us about an initiative from the Assembly about inter-parish associations, how Orthodox parishes within the same geographic area of one another can cooperate, work together, worship together, do all of those great things. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Spyridoula with our thanks for giving us your time tonight. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Stacey. I appreciate it too. Awesome. So I'm excited to share a little bit about the Assembly of Bishops and then the inter-parish associations. So I'm just gonna share a slide real quick. See. Okay, so is everybody seeing? Yes, great. Awesome. So as Stacey said, Assembly of Canonical Orthodox Bishops of the United States of America, lots of words. So yes, I'll probably say Assembly of Bishops, so just so we know what we're referring to, but AOB also is definitely works. So to start, I think it's always helpful to give an overview of who the Assembly of Bishops is and the ministries that we kind of do right now. A lot of people are aware of SCOBA, and so I just want to offer a quick background of what that looks like and what the Assembly does. So as you can see on your screen, in 1960, SCOBA kicked off the modern movement for pan-Orthodox cooperation, and SCOBA was the Standing Conference of Orthodox Bishops of the Americas. And so this was a way to try to bring better cooperation in the pan-Orthodox sphere in North and South and Central America. Obviously, that space is quite large. As we know, even just the United States is large in itself. And so in 2010, the Assembly of Bishops replaced SCOBA with the mandate to coordinate and develop ministries in common while working on a canonical regional plan. And so this was more specific to the United States. Obviously, there's a little bit more history beforehand as it kind of became more focused. But the Assembly of Bishops is made up of all the active canonical Orthodox bishops in the United States of every jurisdiction. And so it is the premier and only official body responsible for unifying the Orthodox Church here in the US. So that's a pretty big deal and a really big kind of vision and mandate that the Assembly has. I wanted to offer a really brief video about the Assembly Bishops. I think it gives a good overview of kind of the role of the Assembly and also the ministries that we have. So I'm hoping this works here. Amazing. So I think this gives a really nice overview, and some of the video needs to be updated, but some of the other ministries that are also happening are the accessibility ministry. So right now, there's a fundraising campaign where working with was it the Orthodox Association for the Deaf? I might have gotten the acronym wrong, but there's a group that is working with the Assembly of Bishops to try to translate the liturgy into American Sign Language and kind of create more accessible materials for the deaf community and other communities. So we're really excited about that. And you can see here in the YouTube video, you see this little wisdom on wheels. So Father Nick Anton, if you haven't seen them, interviews different hierarchs and drives them around and asks them questions. And it's a way to get to know our hierarchs in a more personal way. So I highly recommend checking those out. And finally, there's also the Homelessness Guidebook for Parishes, which is also a project that was done by the Orthodox Christian Ministries on Homelessness that is housed under the Assembly of Bishops Church and Society Committee. So there's a lot of resources on the Assembly of Bishops website. So highly recommend you check it out. Are there any questions about the Assembly for our crowd here?
Nothing yet.
Nothing yet. Great. Okay, awesome. So I'm going to give a little bit more focused kind of perspective on the Inter-Parish Associations Ministry, which I am the director of and serving the Assembly in that way. And so the Inter-Parish Associations, or IPAs, so you can equate it any way you want, Orthodoxy on tap kind of vibe there, but what is an inter-parish association? And so fundamentally, inter-parish associations, or IPAs, promote communication, camaraderie, and cooperation across Orthodox Christian parishes of all jurisdictions in a given geographical area. So they are local, meaning their city or town level, the parishes are the members, and their leadership includes both clergy and laity. Their purpose is to break down barriers across Orthodox Christian jurisdictions and as a unified Orthodox Christian community, witness Christ's love in local society. So it's really, as you saw in the video, this kind of call to love Christ in our communities and really kind of doing this in a fundamental way. Okay. So where did this idea come from? In 2018, the Assembly of Bishops Committee for Canonical Regional Planning presented an idea for associations that mirror the Assembly on a local level. So what does this mean? Since the Assembly of Bishops, its function is to bring the hierarchs together to envision eventual unity of the Orthodox Church, kind of at this top level, the idea was, what does it look like to try to do this on the local level? So we can actually bring together our communities and work towards this unified church. And so the idea looked quite a bit different at that time. It wasn't called Inter-Parish Associations. I actually don't know what the name was, but it was tabled for a while. And then in 2020, the idea was revived with the hiring of the Director of Operations, Father Nick Anton. And so the idea was then brought back to life. And the idea was to then try 2 pilots to see, would this work? What can we learn? What kind of would the future of this idea be? And so in 2021, the 2 pilot cities that were chosen were Atlanta and Akron. So we were talking about Akron before, actually, sorry, didn't put the connection. But they were approached and formed the first inter-parish associations. And so these 2 pilots then in 2023 presented their experiences to the Assembly of Bishops, and then the hierarchs in turn decided to launch the program nationally. It was really also exciting that in late 2023, this ministry received funding for 5 years from the Lilly Endowment to actually try to build this program out. And so you might ask, why Atlanta and why Akron? In our prior conversations, we were talking about Akron as having a lot of really good collaboration happening. And so that was one of the reasons they were chosen. And it was also because they have a really strong lay organization that does a lot of good work on the ground there. And then Atlanta also had a lot of collaboration happening, and that was mostly headed by the clergy brotherhood, the Pan-Orthodox Clergy Brotherhood. So the idea was to see with 2 different pilots, one that had more lay kind of leadership on the local level and one with clergy leadership on the local level, what would be learned. And so what was learned from the pilots was, one, the idea of just saying, take it and run with it was not enough. There needed to be some kind of framework or structure. And there also needed to be more support from the Assembly of Bishops to help local areas understand their context, understand their needs, and then find the right resources and people to work with to really guide their ministry forward. So to kind of dive in a little bit more into how these inter-parish associations work based on the lessons that we learned from the pilots and what really the goal of the Assembly of Bishops is now, especially with dedicated staff, to try to help areas across the country either start collaboration among parishes or grow better collaboration if it's already happening. So as you can see here, the question of who. So fundamentally, it's the parishes. And it's parishes in a local area. So in conversation, we agree upon an area that is actually doable for most people in that kind of mile radius. So if somebody does not want to drive because the traffic is bad or if an hour is really far away, we try to think about who are the parishes that are really close by, kind of in these clusters, and what work can they do together. So the parishes are the members of the Inter-Parish Association, which is a little bit different from if there's a clergy brotherhood or lay organization running kind of the Inter-Parish Association's ministries. The idea is that by having the parish as the member, it provides better sustainability, and then you have equal clergy and lay leadership from each parish representing their parish. And I'll offer kind of what that could look like a little bit later. And so then when you have this kind of leadership from the parish level, these representatives working together, and then better understanding and getting to know one another, this is where we can do this kind of work of interjurisdictionally creating opportunities for common worship, witness, fellowship, and then internal and external ministries. So what do I mean by internal and external ministries? So internal, and this is happening in some areas of the country, there might be some shared catechism. We were talking about the Twin Cities in Minnesota, and they have a really beautiful program where the priests have a shared curriculum, and they then the catechumens rotate the parishes, and this is run through the brotherhood. And so what I've been told is that the catechumens get a really nice flavor of orthodoxy from each parish they go to, and then the burden is shared. The teaching is shared among the clergy. And so it's not just on one clergyman in his parish to tend to his catechumen group. It's a shared responsibility that everyone benefits from. And so it's trying to envision ministries like this. What is there that we can do among our parishes that would be helpful to all of us? So perhaps it's shared youth programs. This is already happening many times informally. Some other kind of collaboration, intergenerational, maybe our camping ministries if they're not already together, choirs, stewardship might be a really creative thing to play with as we're thinking about stewardship in this group, and so much more. And the idea is that we kind of offer this intentional process to think about these things and vision together. What does this look like as it fits our local context? And then in the same vein, we look at external ministries. So we're trying to, again, think about, are we witnessing Christ in our communities? And how does that look? Is there a way to expand it if it's already happening? Or are there ways that we as churches can offer our resources, pull them together, and then really do this work even more? So, of course, we want to work first to understand the local needs. And so we work with our agencies, affiliated ministries of the Assembly, and then other partners and working with local nonprofits on the ground to say, what is the need and how do we plug into the community if we're not already plugged in? And so some possible things that we see around the country, right, are feeding or shower ministries, shelter. I think that's a really big one, seeing different natural disasters, the fires in LA and other places. So we're talking a lot about heating and warming centers or just shelters, right? Many of our churches have large gyms. Is there ways we can offer these spaces and work with local nonprofits who do this work in a safe way? Or even creating welcoming community spaces. When I was just in Denver, one of the parishes there is downtown. There's a lot of homeless people sleeping on their steps. And so they're trying to explore a safe place in their parish hall that also offers actually kind of art spaces and then also is welcoming, warm place. They can just come and get coffee and trying to create this kind of community hub. So let's just say there's a lot of ways to go around this and to think about, again, what is the need and where can we as churches kind of plug into this? Are there any questions? Just stop me. Yes.
It just kind of crossed my mind. Is there typically a first step or a first way that parishes, start their association with one another? I mean, is it usually worship, or is that not necessarily the case?
I think it just depends, and I'll offer some of like concrete steps that we offer as a starting place. But to your point, that's why we first come into each community and just listen to what's happening. So we want to know, hey, is there a Pan-Orthodox Vespers that we do annually, or do we rotate every Vespers of Lent at different parishes? So from a worship perspective, those things might be already happening, they might not be happening, or they're like pre-sanctified liturgies that we share. So there might be a worship element. There might be that all the churches are attached to a focus center and they do service in that way. There might be some other ministry, and addictions ministry was put on my scope this week, or some kind of other feeding ministry parishes are part of, or maybe there's youth or young adult kind of informal programs that are happening. So all this to say, that's where we work with each community in a different way, because everybody's at a different starting point. But what we kind of provide is that, or offer, is that many times these ministries are led by a cluster of people or the clergy, which is really great, but then it's a lot of work for this group of people, whoever it may be. And of course, a lot of, for example, clergy have a lot of responsibilities already. And so by having the parish as the member, the hope is to have, again, kind of both lay and clergy representatives that hopefully share the load, and then can also identify other people to kind of work together. So I'll kind of offer, I think this is a good space to say, where the IPA is really this coordinating hub. And so it tries to understand what's happening among the parishes, as you can see in our little diagram here. So like each parish is a different branch, have their leaves, their parishioners, their ministries, and they're unique, but in coming together, they're stronger and can grow more strongly together as this tree. And so the IPA offers this kind of coordinating hub to understand what ministries do we have, what is working, where can we share resources or share ministry in a way that benefits everyone. And then we, as the Assembly of Bishops, support you to do this kind of work. And what that support looks like, I'll get into a little bit too in a second here. But I hope that kind of helps answer the initial question, and hopefully it's more clear as I continue.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, great, thanks. So I think maybe I'll move to this piece. So as I was mentioning, we're trying to offer this more intentional process of a starting point. So part of it also is that we really want to encourage our communities, and this is also kind of from the funding we received to allow us to do this process, is that some of us do work together. We know each other a little bit, but we haven't really deeply created a lot of relationships, or maybe that is happening. And so we celebrate that and see, okay, what's next? But what we want to offer to IPAs, especially those that are kind of starting from the beginning of collaboration, is kind of these three different levels or phases of an IPA. And again, it's very context specific, so we adjust based on where the starting point is. So the first is really, who are we as a parish? So of course, being grounded in our faith, being, of course, that are kind of Christ as the center, and then understanding what is the history of our parish and our communities in this context. So for example, I'm from Northern New Jersey. So what is the history of the parish that I'm from? Like, they brought my grandfather from Greece to start the community. And so thinking about these histories that are really deeply important to the founding of the church and how it sets us up for today and into the future. And so thinking about this, who are we in this context? And then two is this inter-parish element, sharing these stories among our sister parishes, because we each have a story and a history. And then thinking about, again, ways that we can do more together. So maybe it's worshiping together, it's doing different community building, where we just come together and share a meal, or do some kind of community outreach, or get to know each other. And again, this sharing our stories. And then we work with a consultant, or you can work with one of the consultants we have, to think about more kind of concretely, what are these needs that we're hearing from our parishes? What is the unifying goal or ministry or kind of challenge we see in our community that we want to work on together? And so we kind of go through this visioning process over a couple months to think about, what does this look like? So I think it's really important that there's kind of a focus and a goal that people are excited about and really want to make a change with, right? And so we hope to try to support that kind of process. And then the third one, again, is, like I mentioned, this kind of external, outside of our church walls, after the liturgy, right? Who is our neighbor? So engaging with our community. And so I mentioned, for example, Focus. They're a really good partner of ours. So working with Focus a lot to think about, they have really good tools to understand the needs of the communities, to get to know local community partners. Also IOCC, and others in kind of our network. And so this is what we're trying to do, is really match parishes with people in the church, these kind of experts that do this work to then really fit, okay, we see there's a need to house people or shelter people. Can we work with someone who knows how to do this in our kind of network? And then also outside of that, interfaith and secular and ecumenical as well. So we try to go through these kind of phases. And to build on that, then I'll go back to the parish structure. So I mentioned like a consultant. And so the thing about the inter-parish associations that we try to offer and kind of the I guess, toolkit that we want to give is one that there's hierarchical blessing. And so this is, as I mentioned, a ministry that's blessed by all the hierarchs of the assembly. And so when we go into an area and we start having conversation, there's interest. Once the parishes are interested and there's kind of this critical mass, our team goes and speaks to the respective hierarchs of the area, and we just let them know, hey, these parishes are looking to participate. And most of the times you'll get a letter from your hierarch just encouraging you and giving you their blessing again to be part of the inter-parish association. So it's kind of just this extra layer of blessing as all the bishops have already approved and blessed this ministry. Then second, you have dedicated staff support. So I am the person that is there to pick up any phone calls, answer any questions, work through communities with this process, and really, again, match you to the right resources and people. And again, that's kind of local part of it as well. So a lot of my work is also just networking across the country, understanding what people are doing, and trying to plug in the right actors with each other. This also goes with the framework and resources. So we do kind of have a different models of leadership that we're developing right now. We have one that I'll share in a second to think about how do we actually do this work on the ground. We find it's helpful to just offer an outline that local areas can take and run with or adjust as they need, or if they don't want it, that's totally okay. The role of the assembly is not to push anything or to force anything. We really want this to be locally led, and really the local area knows their context best. So if you ask me for some kind of packet or some kind of workshop about storytelling, I'll send you a workshop outline that we can go through and people on the ground in your community can do it. So that's kind of the idea behind the framework. Also, we have a lot of experts in different things, whether it's strategic planning or if down the road, the idea would be eventually an inter-parish association, since it's a coordinating hub for parishes, could be incorporated. We have lawyers in our network that focus on that. And so these kind of resources and tools that, depending on where each area is, how to connect them to the right resource or expert. And so then thinking about the consultants that I mentioned, one of the beauties of the Lilly funding is that we have 2 dedicated consultants to support inter-parish associations. And so one of them is a research and evaluation consultant. And so with every inter-parish association that's part of kind of this program, we start off with a focus group, one for clergy and one for laity in the local area, to better understand, again, what's happening on the ground as kind of the starting point to listen. And the hope is to do then also quantitative research later on and kind of have a more sound research base, which is really exciting to then be able to kind of see impact over time. But then the biggest thing is that kind of the communities, what is being said on the ground is directly also expressed to the hierarchs. So it's really this connection between local and kind of national, which is really exciting. And the second, which I mentioned earlier, is kind of the strategic visioning or planning. So we work with a consultant who will kind of bring parishes and inter-parish association through a couple months process that's very much guided, but also self kind of led, to think about, again, what can we work on together that we really think is important and we really hear a need for in our community. And finally is this national network. So we hear a lot about, hey, there's this great thing happening here or here or here. And so when we kind of launch a few more IPAs this year, we'll open up this national network for people to jump on once a month and learn from each other, and then be able to also kind of be paired up with different areas that might be a little further along, and those that are just starting out to kind of have this mentor relationship is kind of the hope. And at the same time, we'll be kind of sharing some video resources about what's happening across the country to just kind of offer, again, this little catalyst to think about, oh, hey, that's what they're doing there. Let's think about what we can do here too. And finally, last thing here I'll say is that I did mention funding. And so the funding allows for all of this to happen, but most of the funding goes towards micro grants for IPAs to apply to then use as seed funding for outreach ministries. And so that process hasn't been totally formalized yet because we are in year 2 of this project, but we have most of the funding is dedicated to this. And so the idea is that once the Inter-Parish Association kind of goes through these phases that I mentioned, then at the end, they work again with our kind of community partners and experts in the church to think about, okay, what is the project that is most beneficial to our community? And then can also apply for these micro grants to do this work, which is really exciting. That was a lot of information. Is there any questions on that? Then I'll offer 2 last things. Yeah, Father George or Stacy.
No, I was going to ask if Father Jim or Father George wanted to weigh in here for a minute. I've given my 2 cents of questioning so far.
Yeah, I'll ask a question at the end. We're good.
Okay. Cool. So what I mentioned before is kind of this like structure for leadership. And so what we're kind of offering as a possibility, again, if there is like an existing structure, we work together to figure out what's best, but we really want to have both clergy and lay participation from each parish that is participating. And so this is just kind of a visual of showing that each parish sends their kind of representatives, and we come together into this kind of synergy group, we're calling it, or this coordinating hub or team. And so then it is this group that also works with other ministries that might exist on the ground. So for example, if there's a IOCC committee, if there's a stewardship committee, if there's an OCMC group or ambassador in the area, the idea of the Inter-Parish Association Synergy Group is to know these people, to identify these ministries that exist, or maybe a lay or service organization that's happening, and at the fundamental level, be able to communicate better together. I hear a lot of times that parishes don't know what the other parish is doing, and so this is just very simply trying to streamline communication and to make sure that each parish knows what's happening and it has representation at the table. And then by inviting these other ministries that are on the ground, it allows for, again, better collaboration and cooperation among everyone in the area. That's the hope. And we work again with you to say, okay, what is the structure that worked best for us? And what are the ministries that exist already? And this is just kind of a little bit more of a detailed thing, but we suggest 1 clergyman and then at least 1 lay person. If the parish decides, you can also offer 2 lay people. And the hope is that one of these 3 people is involved in some kind of parish leadership and a young adult. I know that's hard sometimes, but we're trying to think about how do we include different people in these kind of leadership teams. And again, this is just a team that then identifies more people to bring into the work. So the coordination group will then say, hey, we need a working group on communication or on service. And so then identifying people among the parishes that are more dedicated to these kind of specific tasks, or maybe a different model works. And that's where, again, we're kind of trying to create different models to offer to parishes to use. Okay, so last thing here, and then I'll stop. It's kind of like, how do you actually start, as Stacy was saying? So I've offered a lot of information, kind of background ideas of what it could look like. And so I want to just offer kind of the practical, concrete steps that usually happen after I talk to somebody about an inter-parish association. So the first thing is really in conversation defining the locale, the mile radius of how large the area of the inter-parish association will be. The idea is that there's no overlapping inter-parish associations. There should only be 1 for each area, and all parishes are invited. So whether or not they participate from the beginning, every single parish of all jurisdictions are invited of members of the Assembly of Bishops. So that's just Eastern Orthodox churches. It doesn't include Oriental right now, but the hope is to do kind of more service-oriented activities with Oriental Orthodox churches. They're just not part of the Assembly of Bishops, obviously, so they are not part of the beginning part of this. But we hope and pray that you also think about working with them in kind of the community outreach piece. So you define the locale, we work together to figure that out. And then each clergyman goes to their parish. Usually I speak to the clergy brotherhoods first. That's just why it says clergy. If it's a lay organization, the laity will speak with their priest, and then they both go to kind of their parish council. to discuss the interest in starting an IPA. I offer everyone a info packet that has a lot of different templates and information for anything that you may need. Also, if you need a bulletin insert or poster for your bulletin board, this is what our role is, to offer these kind of resources. And as I mentioned, then we go talk to your hierarch. And once the parish agrees to be part of the Inter-Parish Association, you submit a letter. The parish submits a letter to the Assembly of Bishops that says, we want to participate in this. And it's signed by both the clergy and the president of the parish council or equivalent. It also then gives kind of the names, the representatives that will be the parish representatives for the synergy group. And then from there, we plan the first kind of coordination synergy group meeting. And then we start planning the focus group, the listening sessions, and then we plan a kind of celebratory launch event. So in some communities that might be attached to Pan-Orthodox Vespers, Sunday of Orthodoxy Vespers. It might be a Pan-Orthodox Choir Festival. There's a lot of opportunities based on what the local area wants to celebrate. So that was a lot of information, but that is kind of the overview of the Inter-Parish Associations. And the last thing I'll say is I'm always asked, where are they starting right now and where is it going on? So we have the two pilots. We're working with both Atlanta and Akron to kind of move towards this model that we are working towards. Since they were the pilots, they have a slightly different leadership structure, but we work with them very closely and we're trying to kind of bring them into this model as well. And so we don't officially have any other IPAs that have launched, but God willing, we will have 3 launch in the next month or 2. I'm not sure if I'll mention the places right now. Maybe you'll see them in the news. So, but there's about 3. And then I will say that I've spoken to in last year 28 different areas across the country, of course, of level different interests, but I would say at least 15 to 18 showed more kind of dedicated or committed interest, and we're just working together a little bit more. And things take a lot of time in the church is what I learned. So patience is golden. Yeah, so thank you. I'll stop there.
Yeah,
appreciate listening to me.
Thanks, Spyridoula. And yeah, the things moving at the speed of church is a concept I know I had to get used to, just because it's the way that it is. But thanks for all that good information, and everything you presented here tonight. Father George, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, I was going to ask if, as you've been going along, so I know that, as you're piloting things, you're collecting feedback, right? What's working, what's not working, what can we adjust? But have you guys started to collect testimonials, like just kind of statements of endorsement? Because I think when we try to present this stuff to our communities, it all sounds great in theory, but having someone who's actually tried applying it to say, hey, this really did X, Y, and Z for us. We really appreciated it. It was very helpful. I think that the recommendation of a peer, right? We see that in the outreach and evangelism side, that the recommendation of a peer is more effective than anything else. So I just didn't know if you have been collecting testimonials from people who've been participating and where those might be available.
Yeah, so that's a great question. We have plans for this year to actually record a few kind of testimonial-like videos with people in the Atlanta IPA. The Atlanta IPA hosted the Assembly of Bishops meeting last year, so we really got to spend time with them, and it was really beautiful because each of the parishes hosted different elements of the meeting. So all this to say, right now, what we've been doing is informally connecting areas that want a bit more of this concrete. What does it look like with people there? But we'll be hopefully getting those out soon. So not yet. This is why, to your point, it's a little hard because we're piloting a lot of things and experimenting. So we need a couple of communities to be like, yes, we trust you. We'll try it. So yeah, but God willing soon, we'll launch some of that.
At this great. I'm sorry, Stacey.
Go ahead, Father Jim, please. No, you go ahead.
This is great information, Spyridoula. I just want to. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you for what you're doing. And first of all, will we be able to share best practices between groups? Will we be like compiling, this is working here, maybe you guys could try it in this group, and then maybe even have reps meet like we are now so that they can share what's working? Okay, I think that's a great idea. And also let us know as department directors and as people involved in our metropolises and districts, whatever, how we can support your work, because this is important for all of us. So just keep us all in the loop and let us know how we can help. Okay.
Thank you, Fajem. Yeah, thank you. That's the hope of the network. And then if people have ideas too, I'm trying to find the best way to kind of encapsulate these best practices. I think videos are always helpful, or some kind of other multimedia. But so yeah, if people have ideas, I would love to hear them. But that's kind of my hope too, is that even the parish histories or stories, we find a good way to share that, because there's so much really rich history throughout the country. But then, like you said, what is happening now and how do we share it? So, and I will keep you in the loop. Thank you. Yeah, we need it. We all need each other. Thank you.
I'm going to stop recording at this point.
Perfect.
We'll just have our discussion.
Perfect.
But let me offer my thanks again to Spyridoula for our presentation tonight. We really appreciate it.
Amen.